She was bone sick when she arrived, sea-tired, bandy-legged, skin blanched with the voyage and wilted marrow, too young to be paper white, unable to attend even the easiest receptions. Something must be wrong, reporters wrote. Their bets on radium, the gram they said she carried everywhere, like Freud's cocaine or the heart of Mary. They were right, of course. Her thin blood no match for a somber itinerary, honorary doctorates, compulsory teas and train rides. But for each cancellation, pillowed retreat from pressing crowds, she mined the continent for a true tonic to recharge her constitution, shock joy into that small, irradiated body. Pittsburgh Radium Refinery Tour, women's colleges, howling Niagara, star-punched nights on the South Rim spent at El Tovar. Juniper winds, wild sheep, endless Arizona wrapping her in its golden canyon, light sizzling like uranium glass. Then the alchemy of grace, rest for tingling hands beneath hotel sheets, coiled as if waiting to crack open Earth's friable magic, as if everything in America was softly glowing. This was a poem written by remarkable Philadelphia poet Deborah Fries, and this was the first place prize winning poem for the 2013 Sandy Crimmins Poetry Prize, which is published in Philadelphia Stories. And good evening, my name is Charles Carr, and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry. Philly Loves Poetry is a collaboration between the Moonstone Art Center of Philadelphia and PhillyCAM. The focus of our program is to give our audience the experience of the rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia. To understand there are close to 50 organizations besides our colleges and universities that provide venues and opportunities for the love of poetry and the reading of poetry in the city of Philadelphia, either through poetry readings, special poetry events, poetry workshops that take place all over the city, as well as poetry that is printed both online and on the page. So tonight we have really a treasure of Philadelphia poetry, and the topic is our Philadelphia Stories, which this year will be celebrating their 15th anniversary. And let me tell you some things about Philadelphia Stories. The mission of Philadelphia Stories is to cultivate a community of writers, artists, and readers. And the primary vehicle for this mission is the free print magazine, which publishes work by local writers and artists. 5,000 copies of free print magazine are distributed each quarter to more than 200 locations throughout the Delaware Valley, including all 54 branches of the Free Library of Philadelphia. However, besides the magazine, there's much more. Philadelphia Stories has Philadelphia Books, which is a division of Philadelphia Stories, which showcases local writers through book-length works. It also sponsors professional development, hosting affordable writing workshops and conferences like Push to Publish and Lit Life Poetry Festival. Philadelphia Stories also promotes writing and art from the greater Delaware Valley through events like a national fiction contest, a national poetry contest, readings, and much more. And besides our adult writers, Philadelphia Stories has Junior Teen magazine, which is Philadelphia Stories Teen, which is an annual magazine published each fall featuring local writers and artists ages 13 to 18. Philadelphia Stories also publishes the annual magazine Philadelphia Stories Junior for local writers and artists aged 12 and younger, which is published in the spring. So I want to welcome our guest. To my right is an important person in the life and the history of Philadelphia Stories, Courtney Bambrick. And Courtney is a very well-known person in the Philadelphia poetry community. Courtney is the Philadelphia Stories poetry editor. Courtney's poetry has appeared in the Fanzine, Apiary, Certain Circuits, Dirty Napkin, Philadelphia Poets, Mad Poets Review, and the Schuylkill Valley Journal. Courtney teaches composition, creative writing, and literature at Rosemont College, Delaware County Community College, and Widener University. So welcome, Courtney.
Thank you so much.
And next to Courtney is Nicole Marie Mancuso. Nicole is a graduate of Rowan University with a bachelor's degree in writing arts. Nicole is contest coordinator for nonprofit literary magazine Philadelphia Stories and maintains a personal blog that focuses primarily on poetry and fiction. Nicole's work has appeared in Apiary Magazine, Fig Root, I hope I'm saying that right, Press,
Yes.
Spiral Poetry, and she has earned an honorable mention in the Glimmer Train magazine. And next to her is, she's not necessarily a stranger to Philly Loves Poetry because she's been on and before, is Vernita Hall. Vernita is the author of Where William Walked, poems about Philadelphia and its people of color, winner of the Willow Books Grand Prize for Poetry and of the Robert Creeley Prize from Marsh Hawk Press, and the Hitchhiking Robot Learns About Philadelphians, winner of the Moonstone Press Chapbook Contest. Vernita's poems and essays have appeared in numerous anthologies and journals, including the African American Review, American Literary Review, Atlanta Review, Mezzo-Camin, with fellowships from the Fine Arts Work Center and UCross. Vernita holds an MFA in creative writing from Rosemont College and serves on the Poetry Review Board of Philadelphia Stories. So welcome to you all. We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So I'll turn to you, of course, Courtney, first, because you are the editor and you have been, pretty much the history of Philadelphia Stories for quite a while. Tell me about the history and the background to how Philadelphia Stories came to be.
Well, I actually joined Philadelphia Stories, or I was given the opportunity to join the poetry board in, I think, 2008, the summer of 2008. And at that point, Bill Weiser was the poetry editor. And he's a fine poet who happened to have been Christine Weiser's father. Christine and Carla are the two founders of Philadelphia Stories. And they put the magazine together in 2004 after a number of workshops that they took together and just having this idea to do this. Carla had a fundraising background and Christine has sort of a business writing and is an incredibly organized person, so it's a really good match of skills. And they joke about how when they first were talking about it, they considered a monthly magazine. And we're sort of, the thought of that at this point is a little bit hard to handle, but the the intention of just wanting to bring something or having this sort of this sort of place to put all of these incredible resources and just to kind of rally around or create a rallying point around which writers could send things and just be part of this community. And that, I think, is something that I really am proud of, is the community of writers that we've become. And I mean, it might be very selfish, but I'm really glad for the relationships that I personally have made and the friendships and the colleagues that I've met along the way through the magazine. And that's I couldn't possibly begin to.
But when you open this magazine, it's not only poetry.
Correct.
I mean, some of you have artwork in here,
yes.
which I'll just give you one example, of the art, and just the art on the cover here is just really remarkable.
Definitely.
So can you speak to that, how that, how that grew? Because I really think you have enough in this community where it could just be a poetry, but you have expanded it. And I think one of the other fascinating things is that you can go into a number of coffee shops in the city of Philadelphia, which I do.
Yeah.
And you can look on one of these stands they have, and there is Philadelphia Stories. It's free. People can sit there, have their coffee, and read this phenomenal. And they can take it home with them.
They can take it home.
Yep. So,
Share it with friends.
share it with friends. So
Yeah.
how do you do that? How do you make that happen?
I don't know.
Both in, of course, putting this magazine together, the distribution of it, but funding a magazine that 5,000 copies that are free and available to the public.
Well, again, I really have very little to do with that side. We do have memberships and subscribers. We also apply for grants and that sort of thing. And that's been, what's sustained us. And just sort of, whenever we have a party, we pass the hat a little bit.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's important. So if people are interested, our viewers out there that, say, oh yeah, I saw Philadelphia Stories. I just thought everything was free. It just appears every month. But you need support, right?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So how would they go about?
Well, there's a couple ways. The last few pages of the magazine, the last page is always the membership page. So this is a nice way to visit us. Our contact information is there, and we're just philadelphiastories.org. Pretty straightforward.
Right.
And the just you can make a one-time donation. Yearly membership would get the magazine delivered to your house, which is nice. You could be a sustaining member, which is pretty convenient for a lot of folks. And there's lots of different levels, so it's definitely something that kind of warms my heart to sound especially corny about it all, but to look at the list of members and to recognize names, particularly of folks whose work we've published, who then want to give back, which is just such a nice thing. So,
Great.
Yeah.
So this is the 15th anniversary this year.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? I mean.
Yeah. So we are in the process of completing a 15th anniversary anthology of work that has been published over the last about 5 years. The last, whatever that is, 20 issues.
Okay.
And the artwork behind me is actually the cover of that anthology. And those are all of the covers that we've had on the magazine since, I think, fall of 2014, which is kind of a cool thing. And then, and currently the art is, our art editor is Pam McLean Parker, and she's a brilliant photographer and artist in her own right, and she brings that eye to the magazine in just such a powerful way that there's a unity, I think, to each issue. And just talking to her about how she makes her decisions, she really thinks about things like shape and color, not necessarily in terms of the content of the poetry or the stories, but how what kind of story she's telling through how the pieces fit together. And it's really, really exciting to see that. And even as we're putting together the 15th anniversary anthology, and trying to determine, first of all, if we can include art and how that art would be assembled, just the decisions, watching that process, well, the red here and the red here, and those choices, things that I wouldn't necessarily notice right off the bat. She's just very, very brilliant. She has a very good eye. Yeah. So in addition to the anthology, we're also going to be having a big celebration at the Cheltenham Art Center on November 16th. And again, philadelphiastories.org.
So that's coming up very soon.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And again,
so it's November 16th, that's what?
A Saturday.
A Saturday, okay.
Yeah, yep. And there'll be an art show. Speaking of Pam's work, she has brought in a lot of artwork. I think she told me it was some wild number, like maybe 80 pieces of art or 70 pieces of art that she's bringing in from contributors to the magazine from over the years. So it's pretty exciting to have have this coming up, and it'll be great. It'll be really, really terrific. And most of the art will be available for purchase. You know, and again, there'll be a raffle, some silent auction types of items and things like that.
So that is on November the 16th.
Yes.
Where does it take place?
The Cheltenham Art Center.
And where's that located?
Off the top of my head, I don't
Okay.
remember, but
Okay.
Cheltenham.
Cheltenham. Okay. Okay, I know where
Isn't
that
that
is.
enough for you?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's great.
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
So.
So it's, you know, you're on the poetry side, and so we're going to speak about poetry. You know, what does it take? What are you interested in terms of the poetry? In other words, it's Philadelphia stories. So
Sure.
poems about Philadelphia, you know,
Yeah.
are something that's, but there could be, you know, somebody from St. Louis
Right.
that might have a great poem about a city. Is that something that you're also interested in?
Well, I might actually open, is that all right to
Yeah, sure.
involve my
Yeah,
co-conspirators
absolutely.
over here? But I think that this is one of the reasons why having a board is so helpful. I'm not entirely, solely, 100% by myself responsible for the choices that we make most of the time. If I'm in a very, very big rush, maybe I am. But most of the time, the board helps me whittle down our decisions. And we want there to be a Philadelphia connection. It does not need to be thematic or in terms of content. In fact, I know that I have seen poems that have had, you know, a Philadelphia angle that I haven't loved, or it's maybe too on the nose, or it's too sort of, I don't know, the poems aren't as good as they might be, and so the Philadelphia angle isn't necessarily going to, it might kick it in if it's on the fence, but we want the writers to have a Philadelphia connection. We want there to be a connection to someone who lives or has lived or worked or spent significant time in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Delaware.
Okay.
That's kind of what we're looking for. Yeah, I don't know if other folks have a sense about how the Philadelphia aspect of the magazine works as you're reading through things, but.
I don't know. It's different from me since I run both contests, which I know we'll get into
Right.
later. But you know, because we're reading blindly
Sure.
from when we run the contest. But in terms of just what's published in each issue, I don't know. Of course, if you look at something and you see it's about Philadelphia or related to it somehow, it's kind of like, oh, okay, you know, it kind of strikes another chord. But yeah, we're just overall looking for something just striking, different, you know, all the usual suspects. But yeah, I agree with that if it's kind of on the fence, you know, and there's that connection to the city, of course, Philadelphia stories, we want to kind of kick it in there. But I don't know, Vernita, anything?
For me as well, it's really all about the poetry. Something that's resonant, that has beautiful imagery, that has clear evidence of craft. But if there's a Philadelphia connection, a local story, you know, we've just got to share that.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Of course, of course. How many poems would you say you receive a year, or like saying a year? Because I guess you say to certain people, well, we won't do it this quarter, but that looks like something that might be good for one of our future issues.
We don't do that, actually.
No,
We don't
okay.
hold anything for the future.
Okay.
Because that would involve way too much planning and
Okay.
paperwork. But we are on a rolling cycle.
Okay.
So, or, you know, a rolling basis. We accept work on a rolling basis. So, you know, it all comes into submittable, and 4 times over the course of the year, we kind of put the wall down and say, okay, here we go. This is what we're going to deal with. I don't know. I haven't done that. I haven't tried to figure out what our regular, what it usually is. I know that we usually sift through about, you know, anywhere between like 30 and, I don't know, 25 and say 50 submissions within one cycle.
Okay.
You know, 50 would be a lot, but, you know, 25 is probably what we usually have. And what'll happen most of the time is I'll do a pass, and then I'll send it out to the board, and they'll do a pass, and we kind of communicate through comments. And then ideally, best case scenario, we're able to meet and sort of hash it out. We don't do that as often as I'd like. We do most of our communication via email or through submittable through the comments there. But yeah, it's a good. It feels like a good system because we're able to get our ideas out. I will say for the meetings, and I miss them. I try to have at least 2 a year. There have been meetings where I've walked in saying, everybody else liked it, I don't like it. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the meeting, this is my favorite poem. I mean, that happens. Because it's something, you read something maybe once or twice, and maybe you miss some element, or maybe you fixate on one part of it, and then someone else comes along and says, yeah, but did you notice this? And then you're like, oh.
Bringing in different angles to something than you see
exactly.
things that you missed.
So yeah, that's one of the reasons that the board is so very, very valuable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everybody comes to poetry with a different perspective in terms of, some people say, well, I'm not a language poet, or, has a perspective that this is something that always jumps out at them, but that won't jump out for somebody else.
Sure.
So it goes through maybe 3, more than that, because I looked at your board.
There's a bunch. We generally have a rotating, we have a group of about 20 or so that I send that I ask to look at the poems, and then they go and they comment. Certainly not all 20 every time. We usually get between 6 and 8, maybe 10 if I'm really lucky, commenting and responding. And so at the end of each cycle, I'll just sort of go through the comments, decide, are they all making big mistakes, or am I making big mistakes? And kind of come up with a list. And I often will just sort of ask kind of generally, which are the poems that you really want to see in print? Which are the ones that you really want? Which are the ones that you would fight for?
Right. It's so hard and everything's so subjective. We're
Sure,
talking about,
sure.
poetry and art and things like that. Who's to say really what's better than something else? So it's, you just kind of come to the table all trying to agree on, this batch versus this batch. What's the right fit for our magazine?
How many poems go routinely end up in, or does it vary?
It varies quite a lot. I remember there was one issue, probably at least 6 or 7 years ago, where I think we only took 2, and that's the lowest. And that was just it was just a lean
Doesn't
time.
it also depend, I would think, maybe on art?
Yeah.
How many art pieces are going in
Pages.
versus, pages, layout, all of that.
Well, that usually doesn't affect the number of accepted pieces. That determines whether they go into the magazine or online.
Online, right.
And we don't make a distinction necessarily one way or the other regarding, the work online versus the work in print. But sometimes we'll have 4 poems that kind of stick together. The summer issue, I know Vernita's going to read something that has to do with vacuum cleaners. That same issue also featured a refrigerator. It had 2 poems that had historical figures. And it was, and ruby, I think, or some kind of fruit, pomegranate showed up, or like figs and pomegranates showed up in a couple of the poems. So there were weird connections that I started seeing where things were like, they weren't exactly, it wasn't like a thematic thing, but this one and this one kind of matched. And then this one and this one, it was like dominoes with the poems where they kind of ended up making this, okay, that fits together in a way that I would not have originally thought, appliances, exotic fruit, and, historical figures.
It's Philadelphia.
Exactly. But it was a really
Philadelphia.
nice, it kind of hung together in a way that made sense. And so there were a couple poems that didn't speak to any of the other poems. And I was like, I really love these and I don't want to let them go. So they'd end up online in that kind of a situation.
Can you, let's have our other guests speak to your experience with Philadelphia. How long have you been involved with it? And And what is your role?
And what is my role? Okay, so I've been with Philadelphia Stories since about 2011. When I was attending Rowan University, I started as an intern. I needed an internship.
Great.
Caught hold of this through Julia Chang,
Gotcha.
who I believe is still not on the board.
She might be on the
anymore.
board.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
she's still on our board. But yeah, she was my one of my writing teachers, and I started just with the internship, and then when the other contest coordinator had to step down, they asked me to step up, and it's been ever since, about 8 years now.
Great.
And
8 years. Wow.
yeah, since 2011, yeah, or almost 9, I guess.
Yeah.
But I consider myself like the inner gears. I'm kind of like more behind the scenes. I try to make it to as many events as I can because I love being involved and seeing everyone, and it's just working through email is no fun. But I keep our annual fiction and poetry contests up and running.
Yeah.
So the Marguerite McGlynn Prize for Fiction, which just closed, and our first prize was Roger Hart, who is not a local writer. I can't recall where he was
Our
from.
two
I know my
contests are national. The
Yes.
poetry and the fiction contests are both national. So that's like the 2 times over the course of the year that we sort
Right.
branch out
of
big time.
reach pretty broadly.
Right, and bring in other parts
Yeah.
of the country, and to remind everyone that we honor
Yeah.
the arts from everywhere. But he won for Mysteries of the Universe. So I jump from one to the next as soon
Okay.
as our winner's announced, then we open our poetry contest. We are now accepting submissions.
Yes.
You can go to philadelphiastories.org, click on the contests tab, drop down to poetry, and it'll give you all of our guidelines there. But we're accepting entries until November 15th.
Yeah.
Vernita, how about your experience with, how long have you been involved with Philadelphia Stories?
Well, when I graduated Rosemont in 2014, Courtney invited me to join the poetry board of Philadelphia Stories. So I've been reading poems for the magazine since then, and I've been volunteering to work with Nicole
Yes.
with the fantastic job she does with the contests shortly after that, I guess. And before I joined the board, I had one little essay published in Philadelphia Stories, so that got me totally hooked, needless to say. But it's so funny to me when you get these wonderful poets completely disagreeing about some poem. Some people think, oh, this is wonderful, you got to put it in, and some people think, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But the subjectivity is
Yeah.
what makes the contribution and
Yeah.
the collaboration
Yeah.
satisfying.
We're all there. We're all there. And forget about magazines. We're all there. There's different kinds of publications you can pick up. I mean, I, of course, pick up American Poetry Review and poetry, every month, and I'll open it, and some I'm scratching my head about, and I said, I just don't know what the trick is here with that poem, and others they're just so gorgeous and fine. So I think that's the beauty of it, because it's something that speaks to all kinds of audiences.
Indeed.
Do you encourage, like say you go to a poetry reading, do you encourage people to, hey, I heard you read, I think you should submit something to us?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't formally
Right.
solicit. We
Right,
don't say,
right.
hey, send us the thing. I'll definitely
Yeah, right.
publish it. I wouldn't dream to make such a promise. But absolutely. If I go hear somebody read something, and I'll ask, is that available? Would you send it? I'll just ask them to send it through
Right.
Submittable, and let the rest of the board kind of take a look and see. And that's double-edged too, because sometimes you hear something aloud and you love it, and then you see it in print, and you maybe
Right.
like it.
Yeah.
You're maybe not quite as enthralled. So there's some really interesting. There's some lessons I've learned in that process. Just sort of listening to more than the performance, to kind of but it's impossible to kind of visualize it on the page until you've seen it on the page. But that's definitely something. I mean, I've definitely been places where I'm like, oh yes, please send me that, and then I see it. I'm a little bit. It's gotten better.
Visually, your magazine is really very lush. I mean, when I open it, I mean,
Yeah.
just the print, the way it's laid out, the combination of the art with the
Yeah.
stories, and it's really who does that?
Derek.
Derek.
Just
Okay.
Derek.
He saves our butts over and over again. Yeah, he's our the layout, and yeah, where is he? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of folks who are, Derek Carnegie is the art director, and he's the one we send everything to, and he coordinates
Wow.
kind of what.
Well, Derek does a very good job because
does,
it's just
completely.
it's really friendly to the eye when you see these poems. The way, but everything in here is really lovely.
They recently
and-
did an update. The first several years of the magazine, it did feel a little bit as though the poetry was sort of tucked where there was room. And so the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, or however long it's been, with this current look, I've loved it because it does give the poem so much more space. We sometimes put 2 poems in one page
Right,
side by side, but it's not like it used to be where it would be literally, if it was a skinny poem, they gave it only the amount of space that
Right,
it needed.
right.
So it was an interesting
Yeah.
kind of a fight, saying, no,
Yeah.
I want more space.
Yeah.
And now I have it. I think Joe Chilufo, an area poet, Joe Chilufo, had a very short, like a 3 or 4 line poem early on after the redesign, and it gave me just so much joy to have that teeny tiny poem on its own page.
Uh-huh.
I was just so happy with that, and I was just so glad that we
Right,
got to do that. Because it feels like, I think you said, you used the word honor, and it does feel like we're honoring the words by giving them room and giving the reader that space to kind of sit with this one or 2, but this single text for a little bit longer than you would if you're moving from thing to thing. If there's an ad and a piece of art and a poem and the end of a story all on one page, it got a little distracting. So I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased with the way
layout
that
is
it
really
looks.
great.
Yeah, I
So
love it.
we're talking about poetry, and people love to listen to poetry. So can we hear some poetry?
Yeah, sure.
That's what we do, right?
That's what you do. It's called Philly Loves Poetry.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So I have a handful of poems, and the first one is actually, speaking of Philly Loves Poetry, I wanted to shout out one of our sibling publications, which is where this was published a while ago. I do not remember the exact date. I should write that down. But this was published in Apiary, and it's entitled How We Got Our Heart. The birds flew deep inside us and made nests in our lungs. Eggs hatched. Molted feathers made a carpet, and we coughed. Chirps rang in our hollow tree body. Bones went ceramic. Shell shards crushed into grit. In the cage of our ribs, flight was limited, not impossible, the way that nothing is impossible, but still the birds realized what they sacrificed for warmth. The birds lost the power to fly. Waist-winged, they huddled together and started to pump and pump, going nowhere. Dull knives, shallow spoons. Here, I tell you, eat something dangerous as glass. Choke down the dust of all the ground bones. Here, I tell you, open yourself from the spine, break your own rib cage, splay your wings, and swallow all your cries. Here, I tell you, share with me this meal of loss. Let your belly be filled, your cords and wires twisted, your meat marbled, your skin simmered, your hair braids into ropes, unravels into forgetting. We sit together over an empty bowl. Another needle in another finger. Your eyes roll as if unconscious, as if raving, as in ancient diagnoses. The epileptic chokes on her tongue, then wakes from visions of fire. Hell is presented as somehow curative, somehow restorative. Suffer, then be free. Suffer, then relax into perfect health. Your pain will save you. Your pain will save us all. Flesh and fat and the universe. This is a good one for this little chair I'm in. Flesh and fat and the universe. The burns on my hand are parallel lines below the base of my thumb. The first, the result of impatience. The second, of forgetfulness. The pies baked fine, but my skin bubbled. You can dream for days of pressing a hot iron to belly flesh. Dream of sizzle and melt. You can dream of the scissors used to cut away excess, like the material that always gathers in the arm's eye of a blouse. Some flesh you don't need. I'd give it away if I could. Don't we always say that, fat people? Maybe if I think of myself as a thing growing toward harvest. Maybe if I think of myself as a mountain or a vista. Maybe I'm an ocean or an undiscovered planet. Maybe this body is planetary or cosmic. Maybe this skin is the thinnest, rarest air ever breathed. And this is, so something that I'm doing, I guess, that's a little bit different for me is kind of letting non-logic sort of guide me. So sounds often have become more important than what they mean, and I'll sort of go back later and say, oh, maybe that makes sense, or maybe this is what I meant. It's an interesting process, and this is one where the sounds kind of drive the ideas for me. As Mary. What is a city but overlapping bodies? The smells and sounds and shrieks of passing cars, passing hours, passing strangers. Strangers still, the silence of home life, windows down, curtains slid together, darkening. A body sewn back together. Curtains fray at the edge where the machine chewed, pins stuck in the feed dogs, material jammed. Accordion pleats, accordion and wheezy bellows, noise of night. The front room lamp spills white against a wall, spilled milk. I won't cry this time. Dry-eyed as Madonna, as the veiled lady with her holy son. I am that lady, but childless. I am that lady alone. I will not cry. I am not that lady. Come, criticize my tearless eyes, my open mouth and open palm, my open legs and open heart. Oh, golden fog gone gray, gone sparkle-free, gone dull. Morning condensation at the edge of the window, garden still green but fading. Laundry piled to waist high. And all I can offer you, guest, is bread once I cut the mold away. And the last thing I'm going to read isn't actually my poem. This is a poem that was in our most recent spring issue, which is the issue where we celebrate the Sandy Crimmins National Prize in Poetry winners. And just Nicole mentioned this, but the winning poem and the winning poet receives $1,000 and is welcome to join us for Lit Life in April. And then we also have 3 runners-up who each receive $250. And that, I think, we used to have like a second prize, I don't remember what it was $250, I think, for the second prize originally. Mm-hmm. And then I asked if it was possible to expand that to 3 $100 prizes, spread the love. And then I think last year was the first year that we had $250. Our sponsor of the prize, Joseph Sullivan, is an amazing person, and he out of nowhere was like, why don't we increase the runners up to $250? And I said, yes, that makes me very, very happy. So this is one of the runners up. The winning poet this year was by Carlos Andres Gomez, and it was called Elegy for Breath. It's a beautiful poem, but it's way too long for what we're doing. So this is one of the runners-up that I love so much, and it was such a joy to hear the poet Brittany Sterner read this at our at Lit Life last year. She also is one of the library coordinators for One Book, One Philadelphia. So we'll be working with her as we put together our themed issue for the winter. And our theme this year is family, community, and tradition. So we're accepting poems now for that as well. We're taking in a lot of stuff right now. We have a lot of plates spinning. So this is a poem entitled All Objects by Brittany Sterner. Here are feet on the floor of a plane over Omaha. Here are swatches of ground turning into ground. Here is voicemail from an unknown number. Here is every computer-generated test. Here is waiting with glass. Here is middle night. Here are foreheads touching. Here are hands in space. Here is rope. Here is the braid that makes the rope. Here is a death one day. Here is another death. Here is another death. Here is perched investment. Here are plot equations from above. Here are characters for land and love. Here is unstoppable weather. Here is a bowl of ocean. Here is food digesting. Here is top of the bottom. Here is morning again. Here is wake with a ship on the tongue. Here is a mouth of fog. Here are the rotaries of birds. Here, beads traffic in rosaries. Here, graves imitate trees in rows. Here is orchard. Here is fruit clung and hatched. Here is a basket. Here are hands applied over Omaha, braiding highways. Here are lawns cropped in rectangles. Here, tillers in bunches transit. Here, an accident that didn't make news. Here, clipped migration. Here is lamp on a timer. Here, letters spell electricity. Here is the room after leaving. Here is the light going off. I love that.
It's beautiful.
So can we hear some of your poetry?
Yes, absolutely.
Can
So
you hold up your book?
yeah,
Is your-
the poems I'm reading are from a chapbook that I put out about a year ago, All These Things That Haunt You. So my shameless plug, it is available on Amazon, but I
Okay.
have copies on hand
That's
as well.
shameless.
No shame.
So these cover many different subjects from, tumultuous family relationships to a family tragedy that we experienced a few years ago. And this first poem, entitled Bloom, was actually the poem that was published in Fig Root Press. Bloom. You are 28 and slack-mouthed. Your hair grays like storm clouds rolling in, slow, sudden, and everything is beaten into shadow. You flail like a flower in early spring that reaches for warmth, and there is sadness living in the two fine lines between your eyebrows. Your father placed it there when you flailed like an entire field of lilacs, passionately and with meaning, and he didn't even look at you. You, with so much passion, too much for him to hold in his hardened hands, like a weed that cracks the sidewalk. What we got here? The Happening. A pink sun rises and her heart beats in rhythm with the coffee that is drip, drip, dripping in the kitchen. She is warm. She is unknowing still for minutes more, 1 foot dangling casually from bed to floor. Someone puts the bacon on, fat cracking fireworks from the stove while the news drones on. Did she notice the birds in perfect formation as they ripped across the November sky? Slip the back door open just a bit more. The dog, burly as she is, squeezes through and runs, runs, runs. I guess they don't look down from way up there. It's all just noise anyway. It's all the same. It's all the same.
So we'll have time probably for just one more of yours.
Yeah, you got it.
So we can get everybody in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Shape-shifting. I know a woman who is existing in parallels, yawning away the days in a boneyard. She shape-shifts in the rain. She swallows compliments to thicken her lackluster skin. I keep her under my tongue. I keep her beneath the nails on each broken index finger, and she is a trigger I threaten to pull with every aching silent wonder that dresses me in starlight. She comes up for air as often as a fish. I am putting her to bed with dreams. In secret, I am heeding her advice, because our hands are the hands that shift the universe. And I've learned how to sew to hide the damage, maybe even to pretend I don't need any of this.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
Again, would you show our audience this book and where they can get it?
Absolutely. All these things that haunt you, it's available on Amazon. You can just search the title and Nicole Marie Mancuso, and it'll pop right up.
Great.
Thank you.
And Vernita. Vernita was a winner of the Moonstone chapbook contest 3 years ago, Vernita?
About that, yeah.
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 And the other thing I want to add was, if I remember right, you have a very unique day job.
Yes, I'm retired.
You retired, but at that time you were doing
highly
something, you was
recommend
in the technical, more in the technical field.
Yes, I was. I was the last job, I was a senior technical writer with the Philadelphia Gas Works. I
Okay.
wore a lot of hats there,
Okay.
but I was a programmer and a Unix administrator and database administrator and a few things.
Interesting.
So
So let's hear some of your
But
poems.
poetry is
That
much
part
more
of your-
fun.
that- yes.
I stumbled across a story not long ago that disturbed me so much I had to write about it. I'll tell you at the end of the poem, there's a little postscript that will explain the context, but there's something called a dream catcher. I don't know if you've ever, everybody knows the term but me, but it's made out of a wooden or metal hoop that's wrapped in leather. It's decorated with feathers at the bottom, and inside the hoop is a web that you weave, and it's a Native American talisman. The intent is to catch bad dreams. The bad dreams, if you hang it over your bed, bad dreams get tangled up in the web, and good dreams fall through onto you, into you. Well, this woman, this Native American artist, she crafted a dream maker and she made a gift of it. And the circumstances of that gift are what the postscript talks about. And this poem is built like a recipe or an instruction guide. It's called How to Build a Dream Catcher, and the list of supplies are wooden or wire hoop, leather cord, thread, feathers, beads of any color, glue, scissors. Stockpile supplies for your arsenal. For your DIY projects, a well-planned beginning is vital. How you finish is of lesser concern. As to design, choose your targets carefully. Think of these hoops as the framework of your undertaking, skeletons beneath bodies, surfaces smooth as baby skin. Hide your bodies. Wrap cord around the skin tight as a tourniquet. Leave no space for the hoops to breathe. Once you've wrapped, not the ends, cut the cord. To cut quick itself is an art. The Greeks had a specialist for this. Now weave the trap for evil dreams. Here lies the beating heart of your piece. Spin a web of thread inside the covered ring, airy as bride's lace or the mourning veil. Or perhaps a nested silhouette of flower petals, crisp as a chalk outline. Enjoy the thrilling flush of creation, discovery, capture. Savor the performance, a seemingly endless cycle of diminuendo. Push, no, pull, down, repeat. As you fire along, glue severed ends to the body, a final nail in the coffin, so to speak. Be sure not to leave behind any stragglers. The feathers, flimsy as prayer, tie feathers, flimsy as prayer, to the bottom of the frame. Leave them dangling from the edge like ponytails. decorated will with beads of whatever color you're aiming for. I recommend columbine blue. Don't lose sight of the small beads. They're as dear as children. Let none escape. There, all done. If you still have dreams, hang your dream catcher high, where the wind sighs, if there is a wind. If there is no more wind, hang your dreams, yourself, from each small, still body. The April 20th, 1999 massacre in Littleton, Colorado was the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history to that date. To help the community heal, Deborah Gutowski of the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians of Michigan gifted Columbine High School a handmade dream catcher. It was never intended to leave that school. But in the following 19 years, the talisman was shared with 5 other schools around the country who experienced similar tragedies. It now permanently resides at the National Teachers Hall of Fame Museum in Emporia, Kansas. Disturbing story.
Yeah.
I'm very mindful of history and poetry, and in the summer issue of Philadelphia Stories, there's a poem in there that is what I call one of those incidental discoveries of history, where you stumble onto a wonderful story. It may be a family story, and somebody gets you talking about memories or life experience. And apparently James Michener pulled one of these stories out of the poet's father. And it's called My Father Sells a Vacuum Cleaner to James Michener. And I never get a chance to read somebody else's poetry in these demonstrations. It's by Barbara Buckman Strasko. On the writer's doorstep of a large house overlooking the river, my father speaks to the housekeeper. Inside, he dumps dirt on the rug, sucks it up in one whoosh, shows her that the Electrolux will even suck up a steel sphere. Mr. Michener hears a noise, comes to the front hall, agrees to buy the vacuum cleaner, invites my father into his office, where an Underwood sits on a large mahogany desk in front of a photo of the author and John Kennedy shaking hands. Mr. Michener asks about my father's history in Bucks County and is surprised to find out the salesman is a descendant of Edward Hicks, the folk artist, that my father dropped out of pre-med during the Depression and built airplanes for World War II. How would the Quaker Hicks paint a peaceable kingdom in 1964? A war raging in Southeast Asia, the civil rights movement on the move, the next generation not accepting anything less than peace. They speak of these things as if they might solve them standing in this doorway. A canoe floats downstream on the Delaware River in front of them. On the way home, my father will buy corn from a farm stand where they let him cut it from the field himself. Mm-hmm. And I'll close with a shout out to a little girl I know and my family. And this is for Suhani. It's called Singularity. Even among stars, she's a dazzler. This 3-year-old doe-eyed brown dwarf, spunky as sparked hydrogen, she orbits the kitchen in Black Panther PJs or revolves past, breezily ballooning her pink princess petticoat. Electrically, eclectically radiant, eyes, 2 blazing sunspots erupting with mischief and mirth. Black hair, a nebula of tangles, combed into a constellation of rainbowed, bead-bound braids, circling a dimpled sphere of face, glowering or aglow, petulant or persuasive. She is divalicious. She is revolution, a seed speck of dust, layered in light and shadow like a black pearl, light years ahead of us. She brings you one by one her galaxy of dolls, inviting you into her world. The attraction is irresistible. The point is always her, singularity, her being celestial, leaving you eternally starstruck, as stars do.
That's beautiful.
So Nicole, we still have some time left.
Yeah.
You want to read another one of your poems for us?
Absolutely. I did actually also bring a favorite from
Go ahead,
from the
read
this
it.
contest last year as well. One of the runners-up, Chad Frame.
Yes.
Yes.
From Lansdale.
From Lansdale. This is 9-year-old suicide in reverse, which you can tell just by the title definitely strikes a chord. The idea of this unraveling, kind of actually happening in reverse,
I
is
remember that.
very interesting to me. For Jamel Miles. A candle unsnuffs, its smoke drawn back in, its guttering finger with flame relit. The bright blue JanSport rises from the floor and hooks its straps around your slight shoulders. You dart backwards down the carpeted stairs. The door unslams. The yellow bus backs up around the cul-de-sac. Your eyes unclench. The children suck words back away from you. High-fletched F, its bulbous semiquaver. Lofty A, its slopes unassailable. Self-same cliquish GG, backs turned to shun. Surprised O, rolling, caught up in all this. And T, the final burning cross of it. That morning, unknowing, your mother smiles, untossles your hair like wind smoothing grass, and sits. Inky clouds of coffee billow past her pursed lips like possessing spirits.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much.
Of course.
So, once again, Philadelphia Stories, a real treasure. So, if you are in a coffee shop or someplace else and you see it, just relax. Have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever. Open it and read it. Take it home. It's really a lovely, lovely publication. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you
So
for
I
having
want to
us.
remind our listeners and our audience that on November the 16th
Yes.
at the Cheltenham Arts Center,
Yeah.
there's going to be a very special event really celebrating the 15-year anniversary of this very wonderful publication. There's going to be all kinds of things there. There's going to be
Art,
art,
and raffles.
okay,
and-
okay.
yeah, yeah.
And we'll have these great poets there as well. So check that out. I think that's really an important thing for our community. So I want to thank you
Oh,
very
thank you
much
so
for
much, Jeff.
coming. And also we did talk about support for this. So I even reflect back on Moonstone.
Yeah.
Okay, we cannot do this just magically. We need your support to continue to do all the things that we do at Moonstone. We have close to 85 readings of poetry. We're publishing chapbooks, full-length books, and that just doesn't magically happen. We need your support. And you can go to the moonstoneartscenter.org and you can find out ways that you can continue to support us. So once again, I want to thank you, and we want to continue to be in touch with you, continue to read your magazine.
Please
and
do.
I say to all poets out there, this is a marvelous opportunity for you to be published and for you to be known, as a poet in the city of Philadelphia.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining.
Of course.